chlorine dioxide safe for human use? Let's stop there for a minute and talk about bleach. It's true that chlorine dioxide is used in the paper industry as a bleaching agent, and this is where much of the controversy arises. The anti-chlorine dioxide crowd has one argument and one argument only against chlorine dioxide.
The FDA says the ingredients inside are incredibly dangerous.
Essentially, it's a powerful bleach that could poison anyone who drinks it.
To treat everything from cancer to AIDS to autism, but you shouldn't drink it because drinking bleach, as you might guess, isn't good for you.
Aims basically turn into bleach in your stomach.
Is like consuming bleach and is dangerous to your health.
It's bleach.
This argument is simply propaganda. Here's why. As a nurse, I regularly give my patients dangerous substances like Coumadin, a blood thinner which is used as rat poison, chemotherapy, some of which are used as chemical weapons, and salt water for hydration, which is a poison in high concentrations. All of these substances can be beneficial for humans, but can also be highly toxic and even cause death when given in large amounts or inappropriately. The toxicity has everything to do with the dose amount, and it has nothing to do with the label placed on the substance. The same is true for chlorine dioxide. For chlorine dioxide to be used as a bleaching agent, the solution concentration will be on average 5%. Dosing used for human health ranges from 0.000003% to 0.02% solution. When chlorine dioxide is used appropriately in the minuscule quantities required to eliminate pathogens and benefit human health, it's totally safe. So the bleach propaganda argument, which initially scared me away from chlorine dioxide, is completely invalid with reference to how chlorine dioxide is used for internal and external human use. Here's a quote from Scottmas Group, experts in the field of chlorine dioxide disinfection. Quote, "While chlorine dioxide has chlorine in its name, its chemistry is radically different from that of chlorine. As we all learned in high school chemistry, we can mix two compounds and create a third that bears little resemblance with its parents. For instance, by mixing 2 parts of hydrogen gas with 1 of oxygen, liquid water is formed. We should not be misled by the fact that chlorine and chlorine dioxide share a word in common. The chemistries of the 2 compounds are completely different." So now, let's dig into safety. Is chlorine dioxide safe? The answer to this question is yes and no. Yes, it's safe if it's used appropriately, and no, it's not safe if it's used inappropriately. This is true for any chemical, medicine, or substance that is applied to the human body. Because of chlorine dioxide's safe track record, it's used widely as a water purifier and is being used as a safe decontaminant in many industries, including the food and beverage, medical, agricultural, pharmaceutical, and sanitation. Any place where you need to kill all of the bacteria, fungus, and viruses, chlorine dioxide is becoming known as the safest and most effective choice available. Chlorine dioxide was used to safely sterilize the Senate offices after an anthrax attack in Washington, D.C. in 2001, and it has been used to safely clean up Ebola virus hot zones. When used appropriately, chlorine dioxide is safe and is one of the few chemicals that does not harm the environment. Precautions and discretion should be used as would be appropriate with any chemical, medication, herb, or substance used for medical purposes. There are a number of different ways that the users of chlorine dioxide introduce this substance onto and into their bodies. The primary methods of use include topical and oral consumption. For the purposes of this discussion about safety, I'm going to cover the methods that are commonly tested in the scientific research literature, which include oral consumption, inhalation, and ophthalmic. One of the main reasons why chlorine dioxide is replacing chlorine bleach in many water treatment facilities is because its byproducts do not react with organic compounds in the same way as chlorine bleach. The byproducts of chlorine dioxide are safe and not harmful for human consumption. Safety studies performed since the 1970s have shown that chlorine dioxide, when used appropriately, is safe for human consumption. More recent animal studies have also helped to identify safe levels of chlorine dioxide for oral and inhalation use. Let's look at a few of those studies. In 2017, a safety study was performed using mice. Part of this study was performed in order to determine the safety and efficacy of chlorine dioxide when inhaled and taken orally. The conclusion for the inhaled chlorine dioxide was that compared to the control group, quote, inhalation of 10 and 20 parts per million of chlorine dioxide for a full straight 24-hour period did not cause irritation in the mice, and there was no significant difference between the control and the test group. In the same study, the conclusion for the oral dosing of chlorine dioxide was, quote, in the subchronic oral toxicity test, 0, 5, 10, 20, and 40 parts per million chlorine dioxide was prepared to feed mice. Clinical observations of the mice showed no abnormality and no mortality after 90 days for the control and test groups. Administration of up to 40 parts per million chlorine dioxide to mice for 90 days is non-toxic. And again, in the same study, 50 parts per million showed no significant symptoms in a rabbit ophthalmic eye irritation test. In another animal study, 100 milligrams per liter, which is 100 parts per million chlorine dioxide, was added to every liter of drinking water for 30 days, and toxicity on blood components was evaluated. They evaluated a wide range of blood parameters, and they found no significant effects on any of these parameters. In one study, human volunteers drank chlorine dioxide in solution up to 20 parts per million, and it showed no adverse side effects. In another study from 1979, honeybees, which are usually very susceptible to any toxicity, were fed high doses of 10 to 100 parts per million chlorine dioxide in their water supply and showed no ill effects. And not only that, when the concentration was kept between 10 and 100 parts per million, this significantly increased the longevity of the bees. In another study, rats were exposed continuously to inhaled chlorine dioxide at 0.05 parts per million or 0.1 parts per million for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week for 6 months. The study concluded that gas up to 0.1 parts per million exposed to the whole body in rats continuously for 6 months was non-toxic. These rats breathed low concentrations for 6 months continuously and had no adverse side effects. In another study performed in Japan, school children had a significantly reduced incidence of absenteeism during a period when low concentrations of chlorine dioxide were dispersed throughout the classroom. These children were being exposed to safe levels of chlorine dioxide and received the benefit of fewer sick days. According to the Centers for Disease Control, chlorine dioxide is not mutagenic or carcinogenic in humans. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, in a study carried out in 1981, 198 people were exposed to 5 parts per million chlorine dioxide for 3 months, and the EPA researchers failed to identify any significant exposure-related effects when compared to the control group of 118 people. Another study was carried out on chlorine dioxide and its metabolites in 1982, and this was the conclusion, quote, within the limits of the study, the relative safety of oral ingestion of chlorine dioxide and its metabolites, chlorite and chlorate, was demonstrated by the absence of detrimental physiological response. On page 1 of the EPA completed review of chlorine dioxide, it states, quote, at this time, products containing chlorine dioxide and sodium chlorite are intended for agricultural, commercial, industrial, medical, and residential use. On page 2, it states, quote, chlorine dioxide and sodium chlorite do not appear to produce toxic metabolites produced by other substances. To exemplify just how safe chlorine dioxide is, the pharmaceutical company Frontier Pharmaceuticals has produced a variety of FDA-approved safe products containing chlorine dioxide that include an oral rinse and skincare products, and the founder of the company, Howard Alger, even has a patent for using chlorine dioxide to eliminate cancer. The patent states the following, quote, chlorine dioxide, a strong oxidant, can safely be injected into a subject's body, including a tumor, although the compound has not yet been utilized as a cancer treatment in this manner. It goes on to say, quote, chlorine dioxide is highly penetrating and generally considered non-toxic, as demonstrated by its application in deep wounds, third-degree burns, and use in oral and topical diseases. Citations are given for research papers that validate this statement. These can be found in the PDF document listed in the description of this documentary. There are dozens of research papers that extol the benefits and safety of properly applied chlorine dioxide for human wound management and microbial control. In 2014, the Journal of Advances in Skin and Wound Care published an article that stated, quote, "Chlorine dioxide appears to be a safe, biologically acceptable antiseptic wound irrigant that does not appear to interfere with cosmetic outcomes." And from the International Dentistry Journal, published in 2004, it states, quote, "The effectiveness of topical chlorine dioxide, 0.8%, in the management of chronic atrophic candidiasis was demonstrated. Chlorine dioxide provided a safe and clinically effective option." And just so you understand what a 0.8% solution is, let me illustrate. 0.8% when converted to parts per million equals 8,000 parts per million. The typical oral dosing that people use when ingesting chlorine dioxide orally is less than 100 parts per million, and typically less than 50 parts per million. So as an oral rinse, chlorine dioxide was safe and clinically effective at a dose 80 times greater than what is used to receive the beneficial effects through oral ingestion. Chlorine dioxide is even being used medically for the treatment of cancer in France. French physician Laurent Schwartz has been treating patients using a protocol that includes chlorine dioxide. The literature can be reviewed at cancertreatmentjournal.com. When typical users ingest chlorine dioxide by mouth, they're going to be consuming mixtures that range from about 10 parts per million to 100 parts per million. So the range of dosing is within or just slightly above the doses that showed no abnormality and no mortality after 90 days of chronic daily use in the animal studies previously mentioned. Thousands of people, including myself, have experimentally consumed chlorine dioxide for months at a time within the 10 to 100 parts per million dose range. I'm not stating that long-term chronic daily use is recommended. I'm just stating that people have performed long-term chronic daily use experiments without harm. Like any good medicine, chlorine dioxide should be used appropriately to help restore and improve human health. A full review of all of the documents mentioned in this safety section can be found through the link in the description of this documentary. In summary, when used appropriately in the low doses required to neutralize pathogens, chlorine dioxide has been proven safe. When used inappropriately in high doses, chlorine dioxide can be dangerous and it must be used with caution.